like a summary of the facts of the case?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Right. As Senior Counsel for the appellant, I will now begin submission 1. 1.0. The Crown is not vicariously liable in tort for the actions of Constable Miller. Before expanding on 1.1, Council would like to readdress a misinterpretation in relation to when Constable Miller's actions were authorised and when they are unauthorised. Previously in the High Court, it seemed that Counsel for the Crown agreed that Constable Miller was leading an authorised pursuit of a criminal offender, which continued to be authorised until he was requested to abandon the pursuit. Counsel seeks to make clear that Constable Miller was not leading an authorised pursuit at any point when engaged in a high-speed chase through Hamilton City Centre. Instead, Constable Miller was acting as a representative for the Crown while on duty as a police officer up until Miller recognised the offender and shouted out, "Hey you, I know you." After which point Constable Miller was acting for his own revengeful purpose and outside the scope of his employment with the Crown, as well as descending into an unfit state of mind, making him unable to make considerate decisions.
Sorry, Ms. Quinn, I'm going to interrupt you there.
Yes, Your Honour?
Isn't it the fact that Constable Miller was entitled to make a pursuit as he did? And 2 points to that, and when doing so, he was clearly in the operation of his duties as a police officer. That's the fact, isn't it?
Council submits that that is not correct. It has been interpreted incorrectly, and there is plenty of evidence to back up that that is wrong.
What's your evidence to back that up?
So a number of factors support this conclusion, notably Constable Miller's inability to comply with the police pursuit policy. The police pursuit policy defines a pursuit as follows. A pursuit occurs when the driver of a vehicle which has been signalled by a police officer fails to stop and attempts to evade apprehension. The police take action to apprehend the offender. For an incident to become a pursuit, all 3 of these above-mentioned components must be satisfied: signal to stop, fail to stop, and evade apprehension. But when referring back to the facts of our case, it is evident that Constable Miller has made no attempts to signal the offender to stop, and therefore did not initiate a police-defined pursuit, nor an authorised pursuit. To continue, Constable Miller failed to engage his lights or warning sirens. He did not constantly assess the risk of harm to the public, and he did not respond or acknowledge the controlling dispatcher or communications centre supervisor, as he did not reduce his speed nor stop his pursuit when the call was made for him to abandon it, and would have likely continued the pursuit if he had not collided with a stationary vehicle 90 seconds after the order was made, dying on impact, because he was simply following the actions of the offender. These actions all confirm that Constable Miller was not leading an authorised pursuit. Although Constable Miller did call in support from a nearby unit, this is not a necessary factor of a pursuit and therefore should not be used to support or deny your authorisation of the pursuit. So through the evidence I have given there, I believe that, as the Council submits, that is significant enough to prove that Constable Miller was not acting as an authorised pursuit during this time.
So at any time, is that what you're telling me? You're saying that it was not within the scope of his employment at any time.
Once he recognised the offender. Once he recognised the offender, he was not acting within the scope of his employment.
All right, carry on, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Honour. 1.1. Constable Miller performed his actions for his own revengeful purpose. As has just been submitted, Constable Miller was not leading an authorised pursuit. Therefore, he was not acting as a representative of the Crown, and the only alternative is that Constable Miller was committing his actions for his own revengeful purpose.
Well, I'm going to just stop you there.
Yes,
so, if we look at the case of Canadian Pacific Railway Co. in Lockhart, isn't it the fact that whether or not Constable Miller was authorised to act in the way that he did, isn't that, if we look at that authority, irrelevant, and the employer is liable in any event?
Well, there's also evidence in Canadian Pacific Railway that if the servant is using his master's time for his own purpose, which I will continue to explain, that the master is not responsible, and if unauthorised and wrongful that the servant is not connected to his work, then the master is also not responsible.
Alright, carry on.
Right, 1.1.1. The servant was using his master's time or his master's place or his master's horses, vehicles, machinery or tools for his own purpose, then the master is not responsible. A Canadian Pacific Railway in Lockhart. As agreed by all parties, Constable Miller was on duty at the time of the incident and was therefore using the Crown's time and resources appropriately to perform his duties, up until Miller recognised the offender. Constable Miller then used a police car owned by the Crown to follow and chase the offender, performing a multitude of dangerous manoeuvres for his own revengeful purpose. Although Constable Miller was pursuing a criminal offender, which would be within the scope of his employment, he failed to follow the correct police pursuit policy and had a clear connection to the offender. Because of Miller's incorrect protocol and his negative association with the offender, Council submits that Constable Miller was using the Crown's time and resources for his own purpose to apprehend an offender that had personally wronged him. In addition, this occurred while in a situation where he was not in a fit state of mind to be doing so, as my junior counsel will expand on in submission 2. If Your Honour has no further questions related to that, I will move on to 1.1.2.
Yes, please move on, Councillor.
If the unauthorised and wrongful act of a servant is not so connected with the authorised act as to a mode of doing it, but is an independent act, the master is not responsible. Canadian Pacific Railway in Lockhart. There is a clear separation between when Constable Miller is acting for the Crown and when he is not. As Council made clear in submission 1, prior to submission 1.1, the separation happened as soon as Miller recognised the defendant and yelled out to him. Unlike the actions of the workman who was transporting petrol in Central Insurance Cove and North of Ireland Road Transport Board, Council submits that Miller's actions cannot be seen as closely related to his employment. The workman smoking, lighting and carelessly dropping his match was an act of negligence within the scope of his employment because they were so closely related to his employment. In contrast, Constable Miller's pursuit of the offender cannot be considered so connected to an authorised act because Miller was motivated by the personal issues with the offender when he purposely pursued the offender. The employer of the smoking workman was responsible for the negligent actions of its employee because it resulted from the manner in which he carried out his work. In the case at hand, Miller performed the chase entirely separate from his authorised work. Therefore, it was an independent act and the Crown is not responsible. If Your Honour has no further questions, I will move on to 1.2. 1.2. Constable Miller was not acting within the scope of his employment. 1.2.1. The servant is employed only to do a particular work or a particular class of work, and he does something out of the scope of his employment. Again, the master is not responsible for any mischief which he may do to a third party. Scenario 2 from Canadian Pacific Railway in Lockhart. In this case, Constable Miller is only employed to do a particular work or a particular class of work, which is to be a police officer. Constable Miller is not employed to use the Crown's time or resources for his own revengeful purposes when pursuing an offender that had personally wronged him. Therefore, Constable Miller and his actions should be viewed as the work of a third party and not a representative for the Crown, showing that he was acting outside of his employment. 1.2.2.
Well, just a moment, Council. The policy, the police policy itself, doesn't that include a responsibility on Constable Miller for the initiation of a pursuit? As a constable carrying out his duties, isn't there an obligation on him to initiate a pursuit?
That is correct, Your Honour. But Council submits that Constable Miller's purpose for initiating that pursuit was not for the purpose of protecting the citizens or acting for his employment. He did it for his own revengeful purposes because the offender had wronged him and caused him financial harm. He was also not in a fit state of mind to probably to be the person that was pursuing them if you were in a proper situation. If Constable Miller had been in a fit state of mind, he would have recognised that he was not the one that should be pursuing the offendant because he had personal ties to him.
So then let's just get this clear. If I were to hold that I think the learned judge in the lower court was correct on the facts to say that Constable Miller was justified pursuant to the police's own policies in commencing the chase, and what would you then say? Would you say that at some point there is no vicarious liability because at some point during the chase something changed? Or do you say it could only be at the commencement of the chase?
I would submit as the previous counsel submitted, when the supervisor called Constable Miller to abandon the pursuit, that at this point they were limiting his scope of employment, and therefore they should also not be held vicariously liable.
So you want the court to have two trigger points, one being he should never have chased him, two being if it's held that he is to chase him, then it is that at some point during the chase he then went outside his scope.
Council submits the opposite view on that. If you believe that the Crown did not limit his Constable Miller's conduct, did not limit his scope of employment when they called him to abandon it, that should be disregarded because he was already acting outside of his employment.
Yes, I hear your submission, counsel, and it's a good one, and I've read your written submissions and I have asked you several questions, and I'm happy to take the remainder of your written submissions as read. Thank you for your presentation.